It's not a favorite time of year for Canadians when the tax man cometh, and if you believe a new report by the Fraser Institute, the average family is spending more on taxes than basic necessities such as food, shelter, and clothing. The think tank's Canadian Consumer Tax Index, published this week, found the average Canadian household spends 42.7% of its income on taxes. That compares to 36.9% spent on food, shelter, and clothing combined. Charles Leman, Associate Director at the Institute and co author of the study, says the key takeaway is to alert Canadians to the massive tax burden, which has ballooned some 1,787% in nominal terms between 1961 and 2012. Did you ever ask yourself, why do I have to pay taxes? We know what we are told by certain political leaders in this nation. They say that the taxes that they are collecting is to support the social structure, among other devices here in Canada. However, when you do a research, you see that the majority, over 45% or close to 45% of the income that we are generating here in Canada goes to pay government salaries and government blessings upon these ministers and workers of the government. Well, do you really want to know why they force you to pay taxes? Of course you do. We all do. Why am I forced to give up money that I earn? Why am I forced to turn over my salary to the government? A part of it, a percentage of it. Actually, right now, it's the highest percentage rate that it's ever been. The government is taxing its Canadian citizens. The government is placing a tax upon that one who is in servitude, who is in allegiance to Her Majesty, Queen Elizabeth II. So we will go and look where this taxation began and what are the obligations presently in Canada concerning this taxation. We got to go back, way back, to the Constitution Act of 1867. We're looking in Article 91, and it reads as follows: It shall be lawful for the Queen, by and with the advice and consent of the Senate and House of Commons, to make laws for the peace, order, and good government of Canada, the raising of money by any mode of system of taxation. So here we are seeing the first implementation of a law that was passed by the Queen with the advice and consent of the Senate and House of Commons, stating that the government could raise money by any mode of system of taxation upon its Canadian citizens. Now, at this time, it was not Queen Elizabeth II who was considered the Queen of Canada. It was her forebearer, for example. However, nevertheless, the operation of law remains the same. This is where taxation began. They figured that they had the right to place men and women into subjection to their servitude, to Her Majesty, and then produce a subsequent law to bind up that man or woman to pay money, to pay a part of their salary into this system of taxation. And this all began in 1867. So you see, it was back in 1867 that they started that business of taxing their subject or servant. However, in 1967, a new operation of law came forth. A new operation of law was brought forward. In the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 1, it states that all peoples have the right of self-determination. Now notice that subject, peoples, that is referring to the Canadian citizen, that subject, that servant. All peoples have the right of self-determination. By virtue of that right, they freely determine their political status and freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. All peoples may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources without prejudice to any obligations arising out of international economic cooperation based upon the principle of mutual benefit and international law. In no case, in no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. So you see here, it is stating that all the people do not have to give up their wealth and resources based upon the principle of mutual benefit and international law. We are told by the political body in Canada that we pay taxes for the mutual benefit of our society, and that this is our civil duty and our civil responsibility. However, when you go and verify what they are actually doing with the funds they are collecting, as I stated prior, they are spending the majority of these funds upon their own selves, upon the offices of the government, and they are returning only a minute amount of these funds that are being collected back to support their Canadian citizen. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights creates an obligation on Canada. It states that all people may, for their own ends, freely dispose of their natural wealth and resources, without prejudice to any obligations arising out of international economic cooperation, based upon the principle of mutual benefit and international law. This article of law, this operation of law, this freedom, this right that was given to the people had to find its expression in domestic law. Canada is under obligation to respect this right and freedom here within its territory, and they do not have the right to force you to dispose of your natural wealth and resources on the principle of mutual benefit, as they are trying to do. Do you want to give up over 43% of the money you are earning and pursuing after while you are trying to make a living? It is a choice, according to our fundamental rights and freedoms. The international law stated it like this. Look at the wording. Pay particular attention, close attention. In no case may a people be deprived of its own means of subsistence. In no case. This destroys the prescription of law that the state party is trying to use. The state party is bound to the international covenants when they are trying to limit rights and freedoms, and they cannot limit our rights and freedoms more than the international covenant allows them to. However, in this article of law, it states very clearly the governing factor, the principle, says in no case. In no case closes the door. It does not allow them to take action. It does not allow them to create that yoke upon us, to use prescription of law, to force us to give up our means of subsistence into a taxation. In no case, this statement breaks the power of the state party to prescribe this freedom. Canada cannot apply what they call the principle of fundamental justice. This right cannot be prescribed by law if you choose to exercise it.